This is the Steam Controller 2, and it's the first story for today's Deck News Roundup. Valve mistakenly leaked it, and they plugged a hole in their leak, but it was too late. By the way, guys, I know I'm a little late to this particular topic. It's been about a week since we learned about the Ibex and the Roy. Unfortunately, I was waiting for a sponsor to get back to me, and they never did get back to me. So the good news is this video is sponsor-free. For what it's worth, I still think I captured this subject better than most. And of course, there are chapters if you want to skip ahead to something that is more interesting. The thing I love about this is that it's exactly what people wanted. It has complete input parity with the Steam Deck, and in fact, it's basically just the Steam Deck without the screen. And on top of that, of course, they made it so that everything fits in the ergonomics of a controller. It also has symmetrical stick placement, which is something else people definitely wanted. And of course, it has dual trackpads, which it was going to need if people were going to embrace it as a Steam controller. So yeah, this is it. Valve is officially making the Steam Controller 2, and according to where they are in the design phase, this controller is likely about a year away from being available to consumers, so maybe it's something we're going to see in the next holiday season or something. But of course, the question is, will it be standalone, or is it going to come alongside some new hardware? All of this info, by the way, was first shared by Brad Lynch, aka Sadly It's Bradley, who, as I've mentioned on this channel before, is a prolific data miner. Now, these files were found in the latest Steam VR drivers. The code name for this particular controller is Ibex, but Brad is calling this the Steam Duke, and I gotta say, I am here for it. It definitely does give that vibe. I've already seen some people sort of doubt how comfortable or practical this controller would be, but you know, that's how basically everyone felt about the original Steam controller or even the Steam Deck before they were able to get their hands on one.
The triggers feel really nice. The buttons feel really nice. We have back buttons too, two on either side. No, I like it. I actually like it. I think it feels and looks pretty good now that I've had a second for my eyes to adjust from, I guess, just what I'm used to.
Valve has been prototyping these controls for a long time, so I have faith that they'll be good enough for me at least. My friend Carrie pointed out that this controller looks D-pad dominant, but you could say the same about the looks of the Steam Deck, and I would say it turned out that the left analog stick was extremely comfortable to use on the Steam Deck, much more so than the D-pad. Like I said, it's probably going to be a while before we get these in our hands, but this one person is ahead of the curve. He goes by the name Camp Creates, and he's been working on his own Steam Pad controller design for a couple of months, and they look pretty close to the render model that Valve leaked. If these are any indication of what we'll get from Valve, personally, I think we're going to be in good shape. If you're wondering why this render model is showing up in Steam VR drivers, well, so am I. You probably already know that Valve is working on the Deckard, which is their next VR. But something that Brad Lynch has stressed in the past is that the Deckard is not just any ordinary VR headset. It would seem that Valve likes to think of the Deckard as a Steam Deck for your face. So yeah, you'll be able to play VR games on it, but part of Valve's selling point is going to be that you can just play your regular Steam library in a virtual home theater. Given that, it doesn't seem particularly odd that this Steam controller would show up in Steam VR drivers after all, as it's probably going to be one of the main controllers that you would use to play games on the Deckard. And listen, I've said it before, but I'm kind of hoping for a modular Steam Deck too. Imagine that the next Steam Deck is not just more powerful than the current Steam Deck, but it would also support Wi-Fi 7 and could connect to the Deckard wired or wirelessly. Imagine that you could not just dock the next Steam Deck, but maybe Valve would also separately sell an external graphics card that the handheld could dock to, and that would push the Steam Deck 2 all the way to rivaling the power of a traditional home console. For me, that would be incredibly exciting because it would offer a ton of flexibility for all sorts of customers to get exactly the experience that they want. Now, if you want to play more actual VR games, there was another controller that leaked, and we got even more details about that one. It's codenamed Roy, and for many, it's a little weird because it's somewhere between a VR controller and a traditional gamepad. For example, Roy has a D-pad, which would be more helpful for games that you don't normally see in VR, like platformers and fighting games. Of course, the most likely explanation for that is what I said before. Valve is trying to satisfy people that want to play VR games, but also that want to play traditional flat games in a big virtual theater using VR. For this controller, it wasn't just the render model that leaked, but also a texture that could be used for a certain gamepad mode. And then it was discovered that the controller's Blender file was leaked as well. This let people 3D print their own Roy controller models to see what this would look and feel like. Someone even rendered these in augmented reality and found that the proportions are quite close to the Steam Deck. A quick reminder from the last time I talked about this, every button on the Roy, including the D-pad, has capacitive touch, which helps Steam VR to build a pose model for your hand, so that is pretty cool. Now, you might be asking yourself, if you're supposed to play traditional flat games on the Deckard, then where are my trackpads? Well, being VR controllers, these also have individual gyroscopes and accelerometers, so you would likely have accurate pointer-style controls for things like real-time strategy or touch-based games. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the Deckard when it eventually releases, but I will say that Valve is really beginning to get me interested. One of the biggest game publishers, 2K, has removed their launcher from all their games on Steam and the Epic Games Store. They also removed the 2K Launcher Beta, which is a completely separate launcher for Sid Meier's Civilization V. This is an awesome update for people playing these games on Steam Deck or really any PC. Now, this means different things for different games for BioShock Remastered, BioShock 2 Remastered, BioShock Infinite, The Quarry, and Marvel's Midnight Suns. All of those games are going to boot straight into the game rather than the way it used to work, which was first it would pop up what was effectively an advertisement for other 2K games. Now, for XCOM 2, there are actually a few different launch options because the old launcher provided mod support. Now, you're going to want to launch either the new or original mod launcher if you want to continue using mods for this game. They even call out that you can use either of these launchers and have mod support on the Steam Deck, although you may need to use touchscreen for some of that functionality. The Steam Autumn Sale is live, and Valve once again offered a discount on the discontinued Steam Deck LCD models, but for the first time ever, they are now sold out, at least in the US. Valve has been offering the 64GB and 512GB LCD models for a deep discount during every Steam sale in the last year since they've been discontinued, but this is the first time I've ever seen it sold out, so it appears they have now made it through that inventory here in the States. The Steam Deck is dead. Long live the Steam Deck. As for the autumn sale itself, I did put together a few no-brainer games to consider picking up. Castlevania Dominus is available for a record low of $15 on Green Man Gaming. Persona 3 Reload is available for 50% off on Steam for the first time since its release. Nine Souls is a Metroidvania that released earlier this year, and it's received a ton of attention. It has 96% positive reviews, and it's now at a historical low of $21. Sonic and Shadow Generations is already available for $32, which is a great price. A recent obsession of mine is Cosmic Collapse. It plays a lot like Suika, so basically like 2048 meets Tetris, and it's now available for $3.29, which is an absolute steal. Likewise, Tactical Breach Wizards is a turn-based tactics game that is extremely fun and has 98% positive reviews. It's basically XCOM but with wizards. Anyway, it's 20% off for the first time and perfect for your handheld. Finally, Shogun Showdown is another amazingly received turn-based strategy game. This time, it has deck-building elements and 96% positive reviews. It's also 20% off for the first time, which puts it at $12. Next up, I wanted to highlight one of the coolest mods I've seen for the Steam Deck. This just popped up on my YouTube sidebar. It's a new channel called Humble Handhelds, and he is off to an incredible start with this first video being a shell and button replacement for the Steam Deck to make it look like the recent 30th anniversary line of PlayStation products. He used the Extreme Rate shell in Hope Gray and the PlayStation buttons and D-pad from the Sakura Retro Modding Etsy shop. Shell replacements are a pretty challenging mod, especially prying the screen away, but Humble Handhelds did a great job and the mod was well worth it. Honestly, this was an incredible video that explained the motivation for the mod in the first place, went over what were the most challenging parts of it, and even provided a discount code for the shells, so definitely check that video out and show Humble Handhelds some love. Speaking of PlayStation handhelds, news did break last week that Sony is working on a new portable that would be able to play PS5 games on the go. According to a report from Bloomberg, Sony wants to expand the market for PlayStation games, and they've already started working on this new unannounced handheld, although it is likely years away from launch. They also point out that Sony could end up deciding against bringing it to market. Still though, this does absolutely seem to be where the gaming market is headed. Switch 2 is on the way, and it's likely going to launch early next year. Xbox has made it clear that they would like to launch their own handheld, and every PC manufacturer is getting into the game as well. In fact, Tencent and Intel also unveiled their own gaming handheld this past week. The big selling point for this one is that it would support glasses-free 3D gaming. Apparently, it features eye tracking, which would make it so that theoretically, the glasses-free 3D would work regardless of your head positioning. I should also point out this thing is massive. It's got an 11-inch display with 2.5K resolution and 120 Hz refresh rate. The battery is also massive at 100 watt hours. Additionally, the controllers are detachable just like the Switch, but here is the thing. This is very much an experimental product design, and the specs here are incredibly premium. This seems unlikely to make it to market at least anytime soon. On the other hand, a listing for the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus just popped up on Amazon. We know the full specs. It's listed with two configurations featuring the Core Ultra 7 258V or Core Ultra 7 256V. Given that, the new MSI Claw is going to use ARC 140V graphics. Additionally, you'll be able to pick it up with either 32GB or 16GB of LPDDR5X RAM. This will weigh in at just under 800 grams with an 80 watt-hour battery and an 8-inch display with up to 120 Hz refresh rate. As for the price and release date, you'll be able to pick this up for $899 on Christmas Day. The next story is an update on the antitrust suit against Valve. The judge in that case recently ruled on two things. First, the court has decided to grant the plaintiff's motion for class certification, and second, to deny Valve's motion to exclude expert testimony on the plaintiff's side. The class certification in particular is a big milestone for the plaintiff, although the case is far from over. The class here is basically all game developers that sold games on Steam and have gotten paid out since 2017. As a reminder, the suit alleges that Valve is requiring content and price parity for any game it distributes. In other words, Valve will not sell or support a game if the game company sells it for less or offers a better version elsewhere. According to the suit, this applies not only to other stores where Steam keys are being sold, but even to stores that are not selling Steam keys like GOG, Itch.io, and Epic Game Store. Furthermore, the plaintiffs argue that Valve is doing this in order to maintain market control. Basically, the entire industry knows that at this point, if you undercut Steam, you're going to pay for it one way or another, whether it's Valve removing in-platform marketing or sometimes delisting the game from Steam altogether. Finally, the plaintiffs claim that given Valve's market dominance, ostensibly all game companies rely on Steam and cannot afford to lose access to Steam's customers. Of course, Valve strongly denies at least most of these allegations. In any case, now that the class has been certified, that means that if the plaintiffs, Wolfire and Darkcat, were to win the lawsuit, Valve would be owing money potentially to a lot of game devs. More importantly, if Valve loses, it could mean some changes ahead for Valve. The most likely result in that outcome would be that Valve is restricted in how they can enforce those parity clauses. As a result, this would allow game developers more flexibility in how they price their games on different platforms. Less likely is that a court could order Valve to reduce its standard 20 to 30% commission rate, which could lead to a more favorable split for developers. Interestingly, the allegation that Valve doesn't allow game devs to sell or support a game if they sell it for less or offer a better version elsewhere seems kind of contradictory to Gabe's classic quote, "Piracy is almost always a service problem and not a pricing problem." Enforcing strict parity agreements doesn't feel like solving a service problem, and if Steam's unique selling proposition is their vastly superior service, why wouldn't they allow devs to sell their game for cheaper on a service that is clearly inferior? Importantly, though, if Valve is not attempting to enforce strict parity agreements, then I have no doubt that this matter is going to be settled pretty quickly with Valve on the winning side. What do you think? All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. That gang out. Goodbye.